the war between the United States and Iran. It started with the assassination of the supreme leader of Iran, together with one of the most tragic events so far, which was the hit, the attack on a primary school in Iran. Mostly girls, schoolgirls, were assassinated, were killed by the attack. And Donald Trump, he said, he was asked if it was the United States that did this attack. Here is what Donald Trump said.
States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 175 people?
In my opinion, and based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hickson? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Still
But
investigating?
the only side that targets civilians is Iran.
We think it was done. We think it was done by Iran
Can you give us an
because they're very inaccurate, as you know, with their munitions. They have no accuracy whatsoever. It was done by Iran.
John, later on, there are videos released by the Iranian media. The Mehr News is an outlet in Iran. It shows the exact moment of the hitting of that building. Here is the footage. Yeah. Then they slow down the frame. It shows that it was most probably a Tomahawk missile which hit the building. When it comes to such a huge mistake or such a huge problem with these targets, or many people would say, why would someone do that? And what is the main goal of these sort of attacks? You can hit the military targets, all of these, but when it comes to the kids, what is the main point? What is your understanding of what has happened?
First, I want to correct something that Donald Trump said. The Israelis almost exclusively target civilians. It's not that Iran targets civilians, it's Israel that targets civilians. And there are tens of thousands, more than 100,000 dead in Gaza to prove exactly that. Listen, as an American, I want to believe that this was a terrible mistake, but my brain won't allow me to believe that. My brain wants me to believe that either we did this on purpose or the Israelis did it on purpose. It's to traumatize the Iranian people, to take the fight right out of them. I was talking about this on a podcast a couple of days ago, and I said the problem that we're already facing as a country here in the United States is that Donald Trump genuinely believed that as soon as we launched the first missile, the Iranians would be dancing in the streets and the government would fall like a house of cards and everybody would live happily ever after and he would win the Nobel Peace Prize and the Israelis would forever be grateful for our actions. But he was the only person that believed that. Anybody who follows these issues, anybody could have told him, we would not be seen as liberators. We would be seen as invaders and occupiers. Nima, I happened to be in Los Angeles the last couple of days until last night. And the Southern California media keep replaying this demonstration with 200 or 300 Iranian Americans, mostly Jewish, which is quite common in Southern California, dancing in the streets, waving the Shah's flag, waving the Israeli flag. And then our friend Max Blumenthal released a video of one of his journalists interviewing some of these pro-Shah, pro-Israel demonstrators, Iranian American demonstrators, and asking them specifically about the girls that were killed in this strike. And like ghouls, like demons, they say, oh no, that's okay. We're okay with that because, greater good, in the end, it's all going to be for the best. Yeah, it's a shame maybe that these girls were killed, but probably the Iranians did it, but we're okay with it. It's okay to kill children. on the one hand, that is so sick that I don't even have words for it. On the other hand, if you are Benjamin Netanyahu or Donald Trump or Pete Hegseth or Marco Rubio or Itamar Ben-Gvir or any of these other crazy people that are involved, embrace what you believe in. If you're so certain that you're right, embrace it and say, yes, we killed those children. Yes, and we don't apologize. And we're going to kill more children. Own it. At least be honest about it. And they're not even being honest.
John, since the war started, we've seen Iran started with attacking Persian Gulf Arab states and mostly American bases in those states. And how did you find the way that the Iranian military started the war? And the United States, first United States together with Israel strike Iran, and then they came in and strike on Iran. Then we see Iranian attack on Persian, mostly the Persian Gulf Arab states with the American bases. You've been to the region, you know what's going on there. What was the strategy on the part of Iranians with the counteroffensive, if we can put it this way?
I think this was actually a very sophisticated strategy. I was in the Persian Gulf 2 weeks ago. I spent a week in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and then 2 weeks before that, I spent a week in Kuwait. And this was all anybody wanted to talk about. They wanted to know, are the Americans going to attack? And I said, I hate to say it, but I think yes. I said, if there was one thing that I learned in my years at the CIA, it was that if you really want to understand what American military strategy is, watch the movement of American naval vessels. If the United States sends an aircraft carrier with 11 or 12 associated ships, that's an aircraft carrier strike force or an aircraft carrier battle group, or 2 of them, it's because we're serious about attacking. So I told my friends and contacts in the Persian Gulf that, yes, I believe the United States would attack. And they did. Now, the Iranian response has been remarkable. First of all, the Iranians are outgunned. They know they're outgunned. They just don't have the sophisticated, for the most part, hypersonics aside, they don't have the sophisticated technology that the United States and Israel have. But they have these cheap, plentiful, reliable suicide drones. Drones where you don't launch a missile from them, you just strap explosives to them and just crash them into the target. And of course, being drones, you operate them remotely. Well, they're very cheap. You can build one of these for $5,000 or $6,000, $10,000 for a really good one that can go a long distance, like all the way to Israel. It's the future of warfare. It's something that the United States has not fully come to appreciate and understand, but the Iranians do. And so rather than just heave a rocket at Dubai, which admittedly they've done, and they've hit, a couple of hotels, an apartment building, for the most part, they've guided these drones into more sensitive targets. U.S. military bases, U.S. Air Force Base outside of Doha, the headquarters of the 5th Fleet in Manama, the U.S. Army base in Kuwait, and most importantly, oil facilities in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia. So again, Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, they all believe that as soon as we start hitting Iran, the whole country is just going to collapse. And it didn't. And then keep this in mind. Trump is on right now as we're speaking, and he just said the war could be over soon because it's very complete already. Whatever that means. He just said that. It'll be over soon because it's very complete already. Okay. So with that interruption, keep this in mind. For the United States and Israel to win, they have to completely topple the Iranian government and remove all of their leaders. And we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of people that have to be removed, and when I say removed, I mean likely killed. And then they have to install a pro-American, pro-Israeli government in its place. That is virtually impossible, number one. But number two, for the Iranians to win, all they have to do is survive. That's it. If they can just survive this, they win, Israel and the United States lose. And I think that we're very quickly coming to that. Isn't that funny? This Trump press conference lasted about 60 seconds. He just came to the podium to say the war could be over soon. It's very complete.
Yeah. John, I think one of the outcomes of this conflict, of this war, it's a war,
Yes,
would be how this war can change the face of the Middle East, the face of, the policies makers in the Middle East. Because before we had the conflict in Gaza, majority of the people, the public opinion was against Israel, but the politicians, mostly in the Arab states, were somehow trying to play both sides.
yes,
But right now with the war in Iran, they see how fragile, how vulnerable they are against a country that can fire back, that can hit
yes,
them. And we're not talking about it's Iran and Saudi Arabia. Comparing the defense budget of these two countries, Iran is not even comparable to what Saudi Arabia has, 10 times the defense budget of Iran, but they're not capable of defending themselves. This is a huge fragility within a society, that they can buy the arms, but they cannot defend themselves. That's why they need the American base in their country. What is the future for these American bases? Because they were calling Putin, asking him to do something about what is going on. And we learned from Lavrov, from his latest press conference, he said, did you condemn what Israel and America is doing against Iran? So why are you expecting we do something about it? You bought all, you are the main reason of this war happening. What is your understanding of the calculation of these Arab states, the leaders, those decision makers in these countries?
I have to say, they must be very, very disappointed in themselves and very disappointed in the wisdom of this policy, because the whole reason for having the United States in the Persian Gulf in such significant numbers after the liberation of Kuwait in 1991 was so that something like this wouldn't happen, right? If you've got the world's largest Air Force base for the Americans, if you have the headquarters of the Fifth Fleet for the Americans, if you have multiple army bases with 50,000 ground troops for the Americans, and then the Americans can't stop a $5,000 drone from crashing into your luxury hotel or into their own bases. I remember in the days after the 9/11 attacks, President Putin said to President Bush that he was shocked that the Pentagon didn't have any surface-to-air missiles to protect it. Well, guess what? It's almost 25 years later, and we don't have surface-to-air missiles to protect much of anything that we have. So here we are in the Persian Gulf and in an active war zone with bases that have been there for 2.5 decades, 3.5 decades, and we can't even protect them against a $5,000 drone. So the United States is going to have to come up with a serious reevaluation of its military position, its defensive military position, and the countries of the Arab countries of the Persian Gulf are going to have to reassess just how much value added the U.S. military provides if the U.S. can't even protect itself.
Most of the people who voted for Donald Trump, he said he's anti-globalist, all of these policies, the new policies are coming to Washington. We're going to have some sort of change in Washington. So far from what we've seen in Venezuela, in Syria, right now with the war in Iran, do you recognize Donald Trump as against, who is Donald Trump
I don't know
today?
who this man is. Yeah. I don't know who this man is. Well, you know what? I can tell you who he is. He is a man who has been influenced heavily by Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth, frankly. I mean, the conventional wisdom was that Hegseth was an idiot. And maybe he was underestimated. Maybe he's not an idiot. Maybe he's just a typical John McCain neoconservative. Marco Rubio certainly is. He's a Cold Warrior, anti-communist, anti-Cuba, pro-military Cold Warrior. And one of the big complaints that people have had about Donald Trump over the course of years was that Trump tended to parrot back what the last person that he spoke to told him. And when Marco Rubio is both Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, and you're speaking to him every day, and you're speaking to Pete Hegseth every day, and the person that you named Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, you named because you know of his complete loyalty to you, then you're going to essentially turn into John McCain. And I think that's what's happened.
Yeah. John, do you think, you've just mentioned that Donald Trump said we have completed whatever he had in his mind, but are we in a war of attrition? Are we in some sort of war? Because on the part of Iranians, when we talk with them, they say that they're prepared for at least, one of the commanders today said, with at least 8 years, because they have this long history of war against Iraq. They know what is that. The economy of Iran has entered in this week. They are getting back to the same policies, considering the economy that they had during the Iran-Iraq war, just to subsidize everything, helping the people receiving the basics. And it seems that Iran doesn't feel that this is the end for the conflict. They have to continue the conflict. They don't see a reliable adversary on the other side to talk with, to negotiate with. This is one of the basic problems with the United States. We've learned today from one of Iranian official, Kharazi, one of the main, officials, one of the main advisors to the supreme leader of Iran. He said that the negotiation is not the goal anymore for Iran. We are going to bring some sort of problem to the global economy that the whole countries, all countries understand that there has to be a solution, a permanent solution to what's going on. Because negotiation, 2 times Iran tried to negotiate with the United States. Both times they have failed because the United States attacked them while negotiating.
I think that's right. The United States is not a reliable negotiating partner. It's just not. We pretend to negotiate, and then in the midst of the negotiations, we just launch military attacks. We've done that more than once. We've done that more than once in the past, 9 months. So yeah, the United States is not a reliable negotiating partner. The Iranians really could inflict serious harm on the global economy by closing the strait. It's not a permanent hurt because eventually pipelines are going to be built across Saudi Arabia and countries are going to figure out, how to get around it eventually. But for a period of time, it could be a serious problem for the global economy. You mentioned the Iran-Iraq war, and I think that's very important, Ima, because this is something that Americans don't understand. First of all, most Americans have never heard of the Iran-Iraq war. And even the ones that remember the Iran-Iraq war have probably forgotten just how bravely Iranians fought. It was the Iranians that were the victims of aggression. It was Iraqi aggression. And it wasn't just that the Iraqis were aggressors. The Iraqis were electrifying the swamps to electrocute Iranian soldiers in southern Iraq or along the Shatt al-Arab. It was the use of chemical weapons against Iranians and against the Kurds in the north of Iraq. And the Iranians still couldn't be defeated. So that's why I said a few minutes ago that the United States and Israel, to actually declare victory, would need an unequivocal, clear-cut victory where Israel opens an embassy in Tehran and everybody, is friends. It's never, ever going to happen. And instead, I think what's going to happen is the Iranians are going to prove to be far more resilient than the West gave them credit for being. And they're going to They're going to fight back and bog the West down. And in the end, the West is going to have to withdraw, like the U.S. did from Iraq, like the U.S. did from Afghanistan and Somalia and Libya and Syria and all these other places where things have gone wrong.